Natasha, how are we doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for talking with me today about Abraham's Boys.
Mhm.
All right. I have some questions about the storyline, the inspiration for it, but I want to start with what stood out to me the most about your film, which is just how gorgeously shot it is. I mean, you really created a thing of beauty here. I wanted to know what conversations you had with your cinematographer, Julia Swain, about how you wanted the film to look.
Yeah, so Julia is my collaborator. We do everything together. And I think we always approach each new project with sort of the same question, which is what's our palette, right? Like, what are the big sort of pillars of the look? And technically, that comes down to, what's our aspect ratio? What lenses are we using? What's the colors? What's the color story? We always say the color story. And I would say, part of the reason we work so well together is we both really love a more expressionistic approach. So, sort of using something that isn't necessarily bound to the rules of reality, right? We still want to obey the rules of our film, but we allow ourselves, I think, a little bit more freedom with color and shape and sort of the decisions we're making. So, with this one in particular, it was a lot of fun because we not only had the the pieces that we had of our film, right, which is a little bit more like an American Western, but also this sort of rich cinematic history of Dracula and Dracula films from the past, from the original black and white to Francis Ford's piece to, all the different sort of interpretations of Dracula. And so we sort of created the palette from all of these different colors and sort of got selective and sort of decided, okay, well, this is our palette. This is our Dracula palette. The aspect ratio, of course, is something that most people are going to recognize right off the bat.
That was my
Um,
next question. Yep.
yeah, and we liked it for several reasons. First of all, it really places us in the period. So
Mhm.
1915 medium format is becoming more popular, and so that aspect ratio feels historically correct. And it also, for me, I was very interested in exploring it because it's a much more intimate frame. It's more about the character. You see more of the person and less of their environment. And I also knew we were going to be in the house quite a bit. So I wanted to get more of like the ceiling and the vertical
Mhm.
image. So that was very interesting to us. And once we did a few tests with the aspect ratio, we just like completely fell in love with it. And it became like a no-brainer. So yeah, it's really just about starting with this enormous map of like, here's all of the different colors we can use and sort of trimming it down and creating a unique palette of the look of our film.
Well, the hard work paid off. It's really striking. Even just watching on a digital screener, I was very
Yeah.
impressed by it.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. I'm very
So
happy to.
actually, of course, yeah. I just hopped off the last call with Joe Hill. So
Mhm.
tell me what it was about his short story that appealed to you and made you want to bring it to the big screen.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's completely different from everything that you read. I did love the time period of it, but really, I was just very excited by the simplicity of the story, right? Which is really a story of a father and a son, sort of coming into collision with each other, and that sort of universal, simple, elegant story, but placed in the sandbox of Dracula was very exciting to me. And part of my process was then to go back to the original novel, to go back to Bram Stoker's Dracula with the read of the short story and sort of rereading specifically the passages with Abraham, with Van Helsing, looking at it through the lens of his short story and seeing if it all sort of made sense to me organically and as is there a story there? And it was very exciting because I felt like, yes, it's all there. It's all there in Bram Stoker's material. We actually don't change a thing. You keep it completely honest and completely sort of completely grounded in Bram Stoker's novel, and then just move it forward in time. So that to me was great because what I didn't want to do was go back and like change all of this stuff from the novel, like retconning this, that, or the other thing. I did not want to do that. I wanted to very much be in the organic, truthful world of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
And the short story is very compact. I'm a mighty slow reader and I read it very quickly.
Yes, yes.
So what was it like expanding such a concise short story for a feature-length adaptation?
Yeah, I kind of knew that the events of the story were going to be around our midpoint. It was going to be at about the halfway point of our film, sort of when things sort of turn. And so from there, I just sort of backed it up and then moved forward. So I knew I wanted to bring Mina into the story to see the dynamic of the family with both parents. She's already gone by the time we get to Joe's story. So bringing Mina in obviously made all of those complexities really sing in the first half of the film. And then the really fun activity was just pulling on the little kernels, the little threads of Joe's short story to see who from the original material I could bring back into the story. So I tried like a bunch of different iterations of that. There was a version with Quincy, there's all these different directions you can go, and this is sort of where we landed.
Hmm.
But yeah, really it started with putting his story in the middle of the film and then moving backwards and forwards.
Yeah, yeah, the heart of his story is definitely still there, and the things you've added on feel totally organic to that uh,
Mm.
original story. Before I let you go, horror is, it's my thing. It's my bread and butter, and I always love to ask horror filmmakers and artists, what about the genre speaks to you?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think horror is so essential. It's our therapy. It's our way of dealing with the horrors of the world and the evils of the world and these things that we cannot escape. And facing them head on and discussing them and looking at them. And what I really love about horror is that it is such a huge umbrella. So like specifically horror cinema, encapsulating everything from like a slasher to Mulholland Drive, right? Like I see you have the Mulholland Drive poster up there. That's a horror movie, right? So I think it has such versatility as a storytelling tool, and it doesn't shy away from the ugliness of our world and instead tries to do something about it. And that to me is very exciting and in a lot of ways the purpose of creativity and art. So it's a great space to be in, I think.
Amazing. Well, huge congrats on Abraham's Boys, and I am so excited to see what you get up to next.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. I appreciate
Of
it.
Cody,
course, yeah.
how are you?
Hi, Titus. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Good to see you.
You too. Happy to talk about this movie with you.
All right.
All right. So I'm just gonna start by asking, what did you hope to bring to the character of Van Helsing that hasn't been explored by the many actors who have played him before?
Well, we've seen, a lot of different iterations of this character, and um, that was sort of the exciting part of it. Look, Joe Hill's story is in itself its own iteration, right? And projection of that character, and Natasha's adaptation of his story and the way that she fleshed out the script is really really well written, and there's none of the kind of mechanisms that you have in other films, right? You don't have bats flying in and out of rooms. He's not running around with a bag full of steaks and garlic and crucifixes and things. All of those things that we know the Van Helsing backstory. So what intrigued me about this was to find him in a different place, in a different time, in a different country, and with a family. And the nature of it is that which he expresses to his sons is, without it being tropey in his exposition or kind of lack of exposition, is that there is something that is malevolent that is coming, and this is something that he's dealt with
Mm.
before. And so I felt that this guy was that my version of Van Helsing was a kind of a practitioner of stoicism. He's very, very direct and very unflappable, and you can look at that in several different ways. This is just because he has done this work. He has seen so much that he's become sort of desensitized to it. But I felt that the more still I could keep this character, the more that would pull the audience in. Um, and really the boys represent the audience's point of view in this. So they're seeing, they're seeing it through the boys' eyes. So that's really um an interesting take on it. And it's not because it's not it doesn't have all the, the same mechanisms that
Mm.
we've seen prior to it. It's a more psychological um portrayal of this character and this world. Is this all in fact happening? We see evidence of that, or we also, like the boys, are questioning, or is this Van Helsing's descent into madness? So yeah, that's a long-winded answer to a very simple question.
So I'm glad you spoke to that stoicism that you bring to the character because as depicted in this film, Van Helsing is stern and no nonsense, but even in his odd, definitely unorthodox way, he clearly loves his wife and children, even if he doesn't
Yes.
express that in the most obvious way or
Hmm.
through typical means, let's say.
Yeah.
So how did you work as an actor to convey that affection, even if the character doesn't outwardly show it?
I just felt that, and this is something that we would do on the set. I would say to Natasha, in those moments where it could lean into that, there, we needed to see that this man deeply loved and cared for his family. I said, I'm gonna make it very, very simple, and just in a gesture, in a physical move, in the way that he would touch Mina's face or take her hand, or in the way that he would speak to the boys in tone and intent, but to keep it very, very specific, but not to have it linger. And I think that was sort of the key to that, was to have it minimalist, so the audience goes, no, he does, in fact, he loves them. This is he's just not necessarily a touchy-feely guy, but in those moments, even if it's a nanosecond, there is a genuine, pure intent of tenderness and love, and hopefully, and it would seem, based on your reaction, that I succeeded in depicting that. Um, so good.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to confirm that for you. You brought up your director Natasha Kermani. What was it like working with her?
It was incredible. First of all, she's a staggeringly bright individual, and she's an artist. I mean, she's really a true artist. It gives me tremendous um, hope and encouragement to see directors and writers like Natasha emerging. She's a great storyteller. She's a very, very smart director, and she kind of creates the involvement. She's very collaborative. Um, but her nature is to be as collaborative as much as you want to be, or as little as you want to be. But I found it to be seamless with her. Any ideas and directions that she had were very, very specific. Um, I loved working with her, and I feel like this is a springboard, this film, to take her to the next level in her career, because I want to make many more films with her.
Mm.
And I would do it in a heartbeat, and I would, and have been, you know, shouting out to people to say, look, you know what, you get the opportunity. And I said to Natasha too, look, when you have projects in the future, with casting things and stuff, um, that you work in this business long enough, everybody kind of knows everybody.
Yeah,
But I think anybody who I'm acquainted with and close with, actors, I would say, you want to work with her, because she's marvelous. She's absolutely marvelous.
amazing. Before I let you go, you've worked in basically every genre except maybe musical, unless I missed something on your IMDb
Yeah,
page.
no, I haven't gotten there yet.
Well, what is it about horror that specifically appeals to you as an actor?
I haven't done a lot of horror. I've done very little bit. And I don't think of this film as a horror film. I really, like I said, I think it's really truly more of an art film. This is a story about a family, and the circumstances which surround them are what inform the behavior. I think horror serves a purpose. We all like a good ghost story, something that kind of makes us jump, makes us a little bit uncomfortable. And I think, particularly considering, what's going on in the world right now, there's enough stuff that's scary as hell. And oddly, sometimes to see a kind of heightened level of that in the horror genre. It's entertainment at the end of the day, but I think some people don't. My wife does not like a good scare. I I like a good scare, and I felt that this film kind of leaned into the films that I really admire, like The Exorcist and Roman Polanski's The Tenant, The Innocents. This is a more subtle take on it. Um, but it feels like it's grounded in reality in the same way that made The Exorcist work.
Mhm.
And that's by having a really masterfully crafted script and smart director, um, to pull actors in the right direction so that they never comment on that which is going on around them. And horror, when and horror can work. It also in the same way that the goofiness of things like, Friday the 13th,
Mhm.
um, that's so completely over the top that that's kind of like, going on one of those rides that makes you want to vomit because it's too much. It's an overload to the senses. So I think that everything has its place, but I watch horror, good, bad, and indifferent. Sometimes the really bad stuff is highly entertaining. And it takes the same amount of energy to make bad art as it does to make good art. So I always say, give it a shot. But I'm very proud of this film. I think this film, without sounding terribly esoteric and pretentious, it is kind of a higher art than what we sometimes see. I think it really leans into storytelling. Um, and less so relying on visual tropes to kind of
Mhm.
manipulate the audience. It's a thinking person's take on it.
Well, horror fans are super loyal, and high or low, they will watch anything, and I'm sure they're gonna love your movie. So
Well,
thanks so
thank you.
much for talking
I
to me,
appreciate it.
Titus.
It was really nice to talk to you. Have a
You too.
grand day.
All
Take
right,
care.
thanks. All right, Brady Hepner, Jocelin Donahue, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Cody.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Of course. I'm gonna start with a question for both of you, and I'll ask you individually. What was it like working with director Natasha Kermani? Jocelyn, let's hear from you first.
Natasha is really just such a wonderful person and filmmaker, and I had liked her work since seeing Imitation Girl and Lucky, and she really makes these beautiful, deep films that are also very spooky and disturbing. And she's a great communicator. This is really one of the most collaborative sets I've ever been on. She's just great at getting everybody's best ideas and putting them together. And she's actually a musician, and there's some analogy there where she's kind of tuning everyone up to tell the same story, and playing all the departments together, and everyone really comes together to. She just really sets the tone for everyone to feel creative, and she's a wonderful director.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, she's such a lovely person. I actually knew of her work from her VHS 85 thing that she did. That was like, as soon as I saw the name, I instantly recognized where I saw it before. So it was really cool working with somebody that I was a fan of their work. And she's a huge creative, as Jocelyn was saying. Hours on the phone with her before I was ever in California to shoot, just figuring out, really the story we wanted to tell behind these characters and figuring out who these characters were. So to her, I say thank you for letting me kind of take a lot of the creativity on my side and be able to, show who I created Max to be And so she was just such a genius behind the camera that she knew exactly what she wanted. We were able to collaborate before every scene. It was just such a fantastic time, and she's such a lovely person to work for.
We love a collaborative set. I mean, and it shows through in the film. You do feel like a true family unit throughout.
And thank you.
Jocelyn, so you've worked on some iconic horror films. I'm a huge horror fan myself. I loved you in The House of the Devil. Doctor Sleep is one of my favorite films of all time.
Oh, wow, thank
So,
you.
what about the genre appeals to you and keeps pulling you back?
Horror is just a really expansive genre that we can play in as actors and as filmmakers. Like, there's just characters who are trying to survive or solve a mystery or fight evil. Like, there's always high stakes and there's a lot of room for creativity, and I feel like it's one of the most interesting spaces in filmmaking today, because whether you're working on a small budget or at the studio level, audiences are there for it. You know, people want to see stories like this. So it's on a film like this too, like where we didn't have a huge budget, like what Natasha and the team put together, like, is so striking and moving and scary. And it's a genre that allows people to be super creative and tell original stories.
Horror fans show up, so
Yes,
they will
yeah,
definitely be
thank
checking
you.
on
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Now, Brady, you had a role in a previous adaptation of another Joe Hill story, The Black Phone. What is it about his stories that stand out to you?
To me, besides the whole supernatural effect that Joe brings to his stories, is I feel as they're always very realistic and could happen in modern day. Um, like, for instance, the story of Abraham's boys, that could totally have happened in 1915. And so I believe, as a person who, as an audience who loves Joe Hill and his work, I can put myself into the shoes of people who I believe that it could be real. Uh, Realism is what really scares me when it comes to horror, and I think Joe tackles that really well.
Jocelyn, so your character is going through a lot of duress, let's say, throughout the film. Now, there's always, I would imagine, with an actor, a bit of trepidation playing a character like this who you could, uncharitably call as playing crazy in quotation marks. So, how do you, as an actor, approach a character like this without resorting to stereotypes or cliches?
Yeah, Mina's a really tragic character. We see her when she's, been living with the trauma of Dracula's attack for 20 years. She's isolated. She's dealing with Abraham's kind of overbearing obsession. So there's a lot psychologically that she's going through. She's also sick and dealing with a chronic blood infection. She's also on drugs. So there's, yes,
Yeah.
for me, like, this was something where it really mattered to trust Natasha in this situation, because we got to talk things through. I trust how she's going to portray it on screen. We, figured it out together, what her decline would look like, when it was important to be haunted, but not hysterical. That was kind of my goal with Mina, because she's not in a state that most people witness unless you're like right next to someone who's losing their mind. So yeah, it was a challenge. It was scary, but because I trust Natasha so much, I had a safety net.
That trust comes through. I mean, it's a totally grounded character in what could be outsized circumstances. So I
Thank
see
you.
that. Yeah.
Thanks.
And Brady, you're essentially the audience surrogate and main character. So what was it like leading a film like this?
I mean, I think it's every actor's dream to be able to kind of be the character that the audience kind of has the eyes through. Because I feel with Max, he's a man of few words. So I think you really get to sit there with him as a character and experience everything that he's experiencing at the same time. And I think it's a really cool thing with this character, but he's also going through so much in his head. His mother's dying. He's now realizing his father, who he's looked up to his entire life, is now this psychopath that's deteriorating in front of his family before his very eyes. He has to be this parent to his younger brother. because now Abraham's trying to twist his innocent mind. So there's so many things that Max has to go through. And like I said, I do believe that audiences will really feel the pressure of what Max is going through. And then ultimately what he ends up in the end, what he does, I'm really interested in seeing if the audience believes that that's the right choice, if that's the wrong choice, or if Max is now almost turning into who his father was.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for spending some time with me today, and congrats on Abraham's Boys.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Cody.
much.
Cody, thanks for talking to me today.
Joe Hill, how we
I like
doing?
that Mulholland Drive. I like that Mulholland Drive poster.
You know, I maybe put it there hoping that some people would notice it on these interviews.
We won't see the likes of David Lynch again.
I know. Oof, you're telling me.
One
Yeah.
of a kind.
Mm-hmm. Now, Abraham's Boys. This film, based on your short story, did you have a hand in any development of the film at all, or did you kind of just let them do what they would?
You know, my approach to adaptation is, you know, I've told my version of the story. I wrote the short story or the book or whatever, the comic, you know. And if someone wants to make that into a film or a TV show, you know, my view is, well, what's your version of the story? You know, what was in the story that speaks to you personally that you can take and use to make it, you know, to make it live in a different medium.
Mhm.
You know, and if I can be a resource, if you want me to read a script or have questions, I'm happy to be a resource. But I also think there's something to be said for not being too underfoot, you know, hanging over a director's shoulder, and oppressing them with sort of the feeling that they have to be slavishly faithful to what I did. You know, the point is to tap into the energy in the story and then do their own thing. You know, you can actually kill a story by being too faithful and too unwilling to have, you know, to insert your own artistic sensibility into it. Fortunately, I can say, you know, I've had a bunch of adaptations. I thought they were all pretty great. I've been extremely lucky. I've had a terrific run. You know, there are no stinkers yet. Um, and all, you know, from Horns to, you know, the Black Phone to Abraham's Boys, you know, they've all kept the core of what was there in the story, but they've also had the freedom to do their own thing. And you know, and I feel like that's been sort of the secret sauce. I've been very lucky, you know, to have all these, you know, have a bunch of great adaptations.
I mean, it's really important for an adaptation to be made with the medium in mind. You know, your short story
Totally.
is very concise. I'm a slow reader and I read it very quickly.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
You know, also, I just want to say something about Natasha Kermani. You know, she's a one of a kind director. I think everyone who's worked with her and had a chance to work with her and talk with her and stuff realizes what a unique find she is. And she's the kind of director where, you know, you look at her and you work with her and you read her scripts and stuff, and it's just obvious that she's 3 films away from making a Marvel movie. You know, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know which film it's going to be, but you know that shot is coming. And my view of her is it's like I bought Facebook stocks before it blew up big. You know, I got in on the ground floor of the Natasha Kermani explosion. So you know, I count myself pretty lucky.
Yeah, everybody I'm talking to today, I haven't talked to her just yet, but nothing but glowing reviews for her from the
So
cast.
you got to remember that she made the movie with almost no money. Movie's tiny budget, microscopic budget, and I think she might have only had 17 days to film it.
Wow.
You know, incredibly short shooting schedule. You know, unheard of nowadays, and you know that those could have been liabilities, but she used them as opportunities. You know, she used her limitations as opportunities to make a better picture. So you get this film that's tightly compressed. You know, we're trapped on this hill with the Van Helsing family. Mom is losing her mind, and dad is a violent, paranoid fantasist. And there's nowhere for the kids to go. There's nothing out there but 1,000 miles of rattlesnake country, you know, and it has this kind of, you know, classic feel of suspense, like a hand on the throat. It feels like, you know, we're there in the Bates Motel in Psycho, you know, or we're in Jimmy Stewart's apartment in Rear Window. It has that classic sort of Hitchcockian approach to suspense. Um, Except, and I said to someone, at night and in the house, it's Hitchcock. But when we're outside in the daylight, it's a John Ford Western. We're looking at Brady and he's wearing the hat and he's got his sleeves rolled up and he's holding the hatchet and the golden sunlight
The
is
way it's
pouring over
shot,
California.
absolutely. Yeah.
And it just feels like we could be looking at Gregory Peck in a John Ford Western in 1955. And I think it's a great strength of the picture that it's playing its own game. It's not trying to be a modern film at all. It wants to be more timeless than that, to fit in with pictures like, Rio Grande or, High Noon, or Psycho.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's still obviously the seed of your story in there, but given the different mediums and running time, there's different elements.
Wildly
there's
expanded.
Expansions. Exactly. So
Right.
did you have an idea of what maybe any director might do with your short story, bringing it to the screen, or was that kind of a surprise to you?
Well, I thought there was a chance for Natasha to do something special. I read a version of the script, and then we got Titus Welliver. And, how lucky are we to have had him as Van Helsing? There's a moment late in the picture when he does something emotionally that's so chilling and so overpowering. And I guarantee anyone who sees this film is going to be thinking about that moment for weeks. It's just such a shock.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a tour de force performance, from a actor who, can do anything and is right in the zone. So, I'm so lucky to have had the people who worked on the film, get involved and take a chance on it, and that we wound up with something so great. I got to see
Totally.
it. I got to see it. I got to go to the premiere in New Orleans,
Ooh.
at the Overlook Film Festival. First time in New Orleans. It's like the most haunted city in America, and sitting there in the dark and sitting with people watching it, and then hearing screams followed by laughter. Someone played a great gory shock. There's a few moments in the film when everyone screams, and then there's sort of that laughter of relief afterwards. As a horror guy, I love that. I live for that reaction.
Totally. That's an amazing room to have that type of
Right.
experience in. Yeah. Before I let you go, after the success of, The Black Phone and this film, are there any other stories of yours that you'd love to see adapted to the screen?
Well, I got a new novel out this fall in October called King Sorrow, which is about a dragon, some friends bringing a dragon into our reality. And it's a huge doorstop of a book. The kind of book you drop it on your foot, you break your foot. It's like 900 pages long, and it's got, dragons fighting with F-16s and this Indiana Jones style plunge into a troll's cave. And I think that I'd love to see that as like a prestige TV show. That would be really fun, because I want to see that. I want to see the dragon fighting warplanes,
Mm.
and that would be pretty cool. In terms of 20th Century Ghosts, because the Black Phone and Abraham's Boys came out of the same collection, which came out 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And some of those stories have had some pretty wild adventures. There's a few things in there that I think maybe would be pretty great. I'd love to see the first story in the book, Best New Horror. I think that could be a pretty fun horror film. There's another story called The Cape. There's been a lot of superhero stories, and maybe Brightburn, stole our
Oh, yeah.
chance to tell
Mhm.
that story on the big screen. But if you've seen Brightburn, if you're familiar with Brightburn, The Cape is doing something of the same kind of thing. That could be a pretty fun movie too. So I don't know though. I can't complain. I've been pretty lucky to have, two stories come out of that collection and be made into great films.
Totally. Well, I'm
Never
sure.
saw that coming.
Yeah. I'm sure it won't be the last we see of you on the big screen. So thank you
Oh,
so
well,
much
thank
for
you.
speaking with me today, Joe.
Cody, it was great talking to you.
You too.
Rock on.